You got a 3% raise last year. You felt pretty good about it for maybe a week. Then you checked your bank account 2 months later and somehow you had less money than before the raise. Your rent went up, your car insurance went up, your grocery bill is absolutely insane. And you're sitting there thinking, I make more money than I did last year, so why do I feel broke? My name is Minted Finance, and I spend way too much time thinking about why your paycheck doesn't go as far as it used to. If you're someone who's gotten raises, worked overtime, maybe even switched jobs for more money, but you still feel like you're running in place financially, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because we're about to break down exactly why this happens and what you can actually do about it. Here's the thing. Most people think they understand inflation. They hear 3% inflation on the news and think, okay, prices went up 3%, I got a 3% raise, we're even. But that's not how any of this actually works. And the gap between what you think is happening and what's really happening is why you feel poorer every single year. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say you made $50,000 in 2020. Fast forward to today, 2026, and let's say you've gotten a 3% raise every single year. You're proud of yourself. You've been a solid employee. Your salary is now about $58,000. That's $8,000 more a year. You should feel wealthier, right? Wrong. Here's what most people don't realize. That $50,000 you made in 2020 would need to be about $60,000 today just to have the same purchasing power. So even though you're making $8,000 more on paper, you actually have less buying power than you did 6 years ago. You're making more and you're poorer. Let that sink in. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that's just how inflation works. What am I supposed to do about it? And that's exactly the wrong question, because it assumes inflation hits everything equally. It doesn't. And this is where it gets interesting. The government measures inflation using something called the Consumer Price Index. It's basically a basket of goods and services that represents what the average American buys. The problem is, you're not average. Nobody is. The things you spend money on have gone up way more than 3%, and the things you don't spend money on might have barely gone up at all. Let me give you some real numbers. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, between 2020 and 2026, overall inflation averaged around 3 to 4%. Sounds manageable, but here's the breakdown. Eggs up 70% at their peak. Rent in major cities up 20 to 30% depending on where you live. Car insurance up over 50% in some states. Used cars, don't even get me started. Health insurance premiums up double digits year after year. Meanwhile, the price of televisions went down. Electronics got cheaper. Certain clothing items stayed relatively flat. But when was the last time you budgeted for a TV? You buy groceries every week. You pay rent every month. You need car insurance to get to work. The things that eat up most of your paycheck are the exact things that have exploded in price. This is the part that makes me legitimately frustrated with how we talk about money in this country. We act like a 3% raise is keeping up with inflation, when for most people, their actual personal inflation rate is closer to 6, 7, maybe even 10%, depending on their lifestyle and location. You're not imagining it. You really are getting financially squeezed. Now, look, there's a psychological component to this that makes it even worse. It's called the money illusion. Your brain sees that bigger number on your paycheck and feels successful. You got a raise, you're moving up, you're doing better than last year. But your brain is terrible at adjusting for inflation in real time. It sees $58,000 and compares it to $50,000 and thinks, I'm winning, even though in real terms, you're losing. And here's where the trap really gets you. Because you got a raise, because that number went up, you feel like you should be able to afford a little more. Maybe you upgrade your apartment. Maybe you finally splurge on that nicer car. Maybe you go out to eat more often because, hey, you're making more money now. But you just locked in lifestyle inflation on top of actual inflation, and now you're even further behind. This is what most people don't realize. Raises aren't designed to make you richer. In most companies, raises are designed to keep you from quitting. They're retention tools, not wealth-building tools. A 3% annual raise at most companies is literally just them saying, we need you to stay roughly as poor as you were last year so you don't leave. Think about that for a second. Your employer isn't trying to make your life better. They're trying to keep you from getting so frustrated that you update your resume. And because most people don't understand real versus nominal income, it works. You feel appreciated. You feel valued. You don't realize you're on a treadmill. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Minted Finance, this is depressing. What's the actual solution here? And I'm glad you asked, because there is a path forward, but it requires you to completely change how you think about income growth. First, you need to know your real raise, not the number your boss tells you, but the actual increase in purchasing power. If you got a 3% raise and inflation was 4%, you didn't get a raise. You got a 1% pay cut. Start thinking about it that way. It'll change how you negotiate, how you job hunt, and how you plan your career. Second, you have to accept that in most jobs, staying put is a guaranteed way to get poorer over time. The data on this is clear-cut. People who switch jobs every 2 to 3 years earn significantly more over their careers than people who stay loyal to one company. I'm not saying you should job hop recklessly, but if you've been at the same place for 5 years getting 3% raises while inflation is running at 4 or 5%, you're actively choosing to make less money. Here's a real example. Let's say you're making $60,000 at your current job. You've been there 3 years. They give you 3% raises like clockwork. In 2 more years, you'll be making about $64,000. But if you went on the market right now, you could probably find a similar role paying $70,000 or $75,000. That's not a 3% increase. That's a 15 to 25% increase. That's actual wealth building. And here's the kicker. Once you make that jump, your new baseline is higher. Your future raises are calculated off that higher number. Compounding works in your favor instead of against you. This is how people actually get ahead financially, but most people are too scared or too comfortable to make the move. Now, look, I know what some of you are thinking. I like my job. I don't want to leave just for money. And that's fair. I'm not saying money is everything, but I am saying you need to go into that decision with your eyes open. If you're staying at a job that's paying you below market rate, you're not being loyal. You're being charitable. You're donating your labor to a company that would replace you in a week if they needed to. Let me give you the math on what this costs you over time. If you're underpaid by $10,000 a year and you stay in that position for 10 years, that's $100,000 in lost wages. But it's actually worse than that because of compound interest. If you had invested that extra $10,000 a year in a retirement account averaging 7% returns, that's not $100,000 you lost. It's closer to $150,000 because of the growth you missed out on. This is where it gets really uncomfortable. A lot of people avoid this reality because facing it means admitting they've been making a mistake for years. It's easier to believe that you're being smart and stable by staying put than to confront the fact that you've been leaving massive amounts of money on the table. But I'd rather you feel uncomfortable for 5 minutes watching this video than broke for the next 20 years. Here's what I want you to do after watching this video. First, calculate what you made 3 years ago and what you make now. Then use an inflation calculator to see what that old salary would need to be today to have the same buying power. If your current salary isn't at least that much, you've gotten poorer, not richer. Second, figure out what your market rate is. Look at job postings for your role. Talk to recruiters. Get a sense of what you could be making if you were willing to move. Third, make a plan. If you're underpaid, decide whether you're going to negotiate, jump ship, or build income streams outside your job. But make a decision and commit to it. The worst thing you can do is know all of this and do nothing, because I promise you, inflation isn't going anywhere. Your employer isn't going to suddenly start giving you 10% raises out of the goodness of their own heart. The only thing that changes is whether you decide to take control of your financial trajectory or let it happen to you. Look, I know this is heavy. I know it's not fun to realize you've been running in place financially even though you've been working hard and doing everything you were told to do. But here's the good news. You're still here. You're still learning. You're still capable of making different choices. The people who build wealth aren't smarter than you. They're just more intentional. They see the game for what it is and they play it accordingly. Your salary is going to feel smaller every year unless you do something about it. Inflation is real. Lifestyle creep is real. Wage stagnation is real. But so is your ability to negotiate better, switch jobs strategically, and build income streams that actually move the needle. You're not stuck. You just have to be willing to make moves that feel uncomfortable in the short term to build the kind of financial security you actually want in the long term. If this video helped you see your financial situation more clearly, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We don't talk about this stuff enough. We pretend like hard work and loyalty are enough when the math clearly shows they're not. The people who win financially aren't the ones who work the hardest. They're the ones who understand the game they're playing. They know that employers will pay you as little as possible to keep you around. They know that inflation is eating away at your purchasing power every single day. They know that the only way to get ahead is to be aggressive about increasing your income faster than your expenses grow. And here's the part that nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to understand. Your financial future isn't your employer's responsibility. It's yours. Your company will give you a 3% raise, watch inflation run at 5%, and sleep just fine at night. They'll tell you you're doing a great job while your real income shrinks year after year. It's not personal, it's just business. And if you don't treat your career and your income the same way, you're going to get left behind. So here's what I want you to do after watching this video. First, calculate what you made 3 years ago and what you make now. Then use an inflation calculator to see what that old salary would need to be today to have the same